Hey, everybody. Welcome to Crackpot, the podcast where each and every week we dive into a different conspiracy theory and we also discuss the merits or the demerits of each. We're your hosts. I'm Tim.
And I'm Zach. Timothy Jerome, welcome back.
Thank you, Zachary Nigel.
We have, on occasion, topical topics, things that are timely, relevant to citizens of the world, of the universe, if you will. I think, without jumping too far ahead, this falls into one of those categories.
Topical one. Yeah. Yeah, I'd say we're maybe a couple months behind, but I needed time to digest, time to go over it, time to let it all slosh around between my ears. You know what I mean? So this, if you haven't already looked at the title that you clicked on, is something that we haven't landed on yet, but it's an update on the UAP Disclosure Report that the United States government put out earlier this summer 2021.
And there was a bunch of hype going into this. Like, it was like last year, like, ooh, this thing's coming.
It's going to be huge. It's going to be great.
Right.
What do you know about it?
It's huge and it's great.
Yeah, perfect. End of show. Seriously, though. Did you read it? Did you look at it?
No.
Have you read all the think pieces or whatever?
No. So I have gotten information via osmosis is probably what I would say.
Okay, good.
Although I haven't read it, I think I kind of know what's in there through social media, clips, the New York Times, etc.
Exactly. So if you haven't already, just Google it or go to askjeeves.com and find it. And it's 9 pages. It's 9 pages. Not only is it 9 pages, one of the pages is actually the cover page, which says Office of the Director of National Intelligence and gives the date and the title of the thing, which is Preliminary Assessment: Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. So it's really 8 pages.
That's the exact strategy that I took for most of my papers in college and law school.
I know. So I don't know where you were at or what you thought was going to happen. I was kind of holding out hopes that it would be like 300 pages with graphs and charts and arrows and, shiny, glossy photographs on the back of each one. Turns out it wasn't.
There was a part of me that very, sincerely believed. And it was like a 2% part of me that believed this. That, exactly what you just described. Like, this is it. Here we go, finally.
This is what it's going to be, yeah.
The other 98% was like, well, it could be 300 pages, 299 of which are actually redacted.
That's what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And we got neither. We got 8 pages. Honestly, more like 7.5 if you really look at the bullet points and stuff like this. So a lot of people are disappointed. Just really bummed out, of course.
Color me shocked.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I mean, I think some people would have been disappointed if, it was like absolutely everything and they forgot to include, the color and the shape of Bob Lazar's, sports model UFO that he worked on. But nevertheless, Zach, I want to walk you through what's in here. And I want to explain why you can be disappointed. And also, it's kind of still a pretty big deal.
That's true.
So, released June 25th, 2021. It was a Friday. They actually waited until the markets closed to release it, which I don't know. I mean, maybe that was intentional, maybe not. But nevertheless, they did after the bell, New York Stock Exchange. But the site that hosted it crashed almost immediately. No surprise there.
Sure.
And like I said, 9 pages in total. Turns out it was written by 2 part-time employees who were given 180 days to put it together.
Oh, okay.
So
great start.
Also, 2 people, 180 days. I don't care if you're working part-time or not. You can probably do better than 9 pages. But hey, they were probably given a very limited, strict structure as to what they could say and not say and so on and so forth. So the data in the report, or the data that is referenced in the report, is all data that was collected between November of 2004 and March of 2021. And the data references 144 reports from the United States government or United States government sources. And those 144 are actually truly unidentified aerial phenomenon. And by the way, we should probably quickly at the outset point out that it's no longer UFO.
That's right.
Get on the trolley, Grandpa. It's now UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. And I don't care how many times I try to remember that. I will still likely say UFO, even in this episode, probably. But 144 truly unidentified aerial phenomenon. 80 of those 144, 80 of them involved multiple sensor detection.
Sure.
Which was anything from radar, infrared, electro-optical, weapons-seeking things inside of aircraft, or even visual. So 80 of them crossed different sensor detections.
That makes sense.
And for this reason, and this is a big key, this is a huge takeaway, the United States government is now officially on the record in black and white saying that UAP are physical objects, which seems so like, well, duh.
Yeah.
Like, obviously. But up until this point, they haven't admitted that, to be very blunt.
That's true. And so what this is telling us here is it's more than just, or likely more than just a fleck or a speck of dust on a camera or somebody's goggles. Like, multiple systems were able to detect roughly the same thing.
Exactly.
Now the question mark is, what is that thing?
Well, okay. Well, they broke UAP into 5 different categories. So they said before we get to like truly unidentified, there's 5 different areas that these could fall into.
Okay.
First one, airborne clutter. Could be birds, balloons, drones, plastic bags. See something floating in the wind, is like, what is that? And then they dig into it more and they're like, oh, okay, it's a plastic bag or a drone. 2, natural atmospheric phenomenon. Ice crystals, moisture, thermal fluctuations. Pretty simple stuff.
Makes sense.
But, you're flying at Mach 12 or whatever, and it's like, whoa, what was that? Okay, so that's a category. Third one, United States government or U.S. industry development programs. So either developing or classified. So we're talking like Skunk Works, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, that sort of stuff. Number 4 could be foreign adversary systems. So we're talking about Russia, China, any sort of like new technology, new elite aircraft, new drones, whatever it might be. And if you can rule out those 4 and anything else, then it falls into other. And, between 2004 and March of 2021, 144 that they captured were in the other. And they say in this that doesn't mean they're extraterrestrial. That doesn't mean that they're spacecraft from Zeta Reticuli. It just means that they either have limited data, the collection process isn't good, or we just don't have the scientific advances yet to figure out what it is.
Sure. It's still a high, large number, I think.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big deal.
Right. So 18 of those 144 showed what they called unusual flight characteristics. So we're talking being stationary in strong winds. We're talking moving against winds. We're talking maneuvering abruptly. And considerable speed with no means of propulsion.
Okay.
So when you capture a metallic object moving abruptly with no means of propulsion on multiple different systems, it's like, well, what are we actually talking about here?
Well, and I think to that end, the video footage that we've seen is compelling and consistent, at least most of it, with exactly what was just laid out. You can't really explain it in terms of how we understand physics today, we can't explain away the movements. So.
Exactly. And they did say that unusual flight characteristics could be recording errors. It could be spoofing by foreign technology or foreign adversaries. It could be anything else. It doesn't, again, necessarily mean extraterrestrial craft. Some of the 18, this is wild, some of those 18 military aircraft processed and heard and recorded radio frequency energy.
Oh, no
coming
way.
From,
Oh, that's cool.
I know.
Whew, there we go.
What did it say? What was it? What frequency? No idea. Of course, it's not in the 9-page summary put together by 2 summer interns, but it's like, whoa.
Okay, that's cool.
That's cool. Never heard that one before. And then, of course, I kind of mentioned this before, but they found no evidence of foreign technology, quote, indicative of a major technological breakthrough.
Okay.
So of these, 144 or 18 or however you want to break or parse that out, they're like, yes, I know what you're thinking. Maybe China figured out physics that we can't even comprehend, or Russia or someone. They're like, no, that's looked at it, not the case.
Sure.
So, I don't know. So far, where's your head at?
Well, it sounds like what they're trying to do is rule out any kind of natural explanation, right? Which makes a ton of sense. And so it's like, okay, considering however many thousands probably of data points they had to start with, let's narrow the scope. Let's talk about the ones we truly cannot explain. We're not going to give you an answer.
We're not going to tell you what we found, but oh boy, some of it was weird.
Yeah, the radio frequency one is crazy.
I love that one. Yeah, for sure. So one of the other things that they were tasked to do, in addition to this report, and we'll get into kind of how that all came about in a moment, but one of them was the development of the UAPTF, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, which is to, it's to basically have a common place where anyone in the military, the government, can go to when they see something weird, something strange in their neighborhood, right?
Okay.
Because up until this point, really, there wasn't anything, which is and was an issue even with creating this report because, we'll get into some of those obstacles, but now there is a centralized location. Now there is an actual process that needs to happen when they look into these, when something's reported, and military service members are actively encouraged to do this because it's like, hey, these guys are buzzing around our airfields, are buzzing around our training exercises, our nuclear facilities. It's like, this is a security risk. This is all sorts of crazy. We need to document this stuff. No more hush-hush.
Exactly. It's a national security issue. It's that simple.
They also mentioned that there were 11 near misses with pilots.
Oh, imagine that.
Yeah.
And of course, they didn't say in this report, but I wonder if there ever was an actual collision.
Well, yeah, that would be wild.
Oh, man.
It's like, training exercise, pilot down, he lived. Yeah. But like, what?
Seriously.
And again, like, what's a near miss? Is it like 12 feet or is it 12,000 feet? I mean, hey, when you're going like Mach 4 or who knows, like anything in your area is a potential danger. But as I kind of said, there were a lot of challenges to collecting this data. One, of course, is just the stigma of the pilots.
Right.
Like, people would see weird stuff and they're like, hey, do you want to report it? And they're like, yeah, no. I like my career and I like flying and I like the hours I get in my plane. I don't want to come across as a kook or something like that.
Exactly.
So, you hear like even Commander Fravor, when he reported the Tic Tac off the Nimitz ship, he got a lot of flack for that.
All right.
It's like, well, I needed to report it. And, like everyone was razzing him and hazing him and all this sort of stuff. It's like, yeah, stop that. Like, this is serious stuff now. And another one of the challenges of collecting the data was just the military sensors on these aircraft and even the aircraft carriers and stuff like that. They're not built for tracking UAPs.
Okay.
It's like you got optical sensors that show the shape and size, and then you got like radio frequency that shows maybe velocity and range, but there's no megapixel super camera that's snapping pictures in 180, 360 degrees, looking for tiny little specks on the horizon that move at like, from 0 to 60,000 miles an hour or whatever it is. So it's like, there's a lot of issues when it comes to collecting this data. But now, or actually just before this, the Navy started a standardized reporting mechanism in March of 2019. The United States Air Force started a standardized mechanism for reporting in November of 2020. And what this does is now kind of puts it all under the same roof. But most of these 144, or even the ones that didn't make this report that they were able to rule out, most of them came within the last 2 years, basically since these things started. So even though it goes back to 2004, it's primarily like the last 2 years when they actually started encouraging these pilots and other people to report this stuff. And most of the reports, according to this document, are coming from the Navy, United States Air Force, and the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. So, lastly, to round it all out, you'll be shocked to find out that they say, hey, there's some weird stuff. We want to figure it out, but it's going to take a lot of money to figure this out. And by the way, we could use some more money.
Sure.
So I got to ask you right off the bat, considering this is a conspiracy theory show, is this all a setup to get the Pentagon like a couple more $1 trillion?
Yeah, sure, it could be.
Right.
And I'd be okay with that if it's going to go towards studying this stuff.
If it's going to go towards studying it, maybe. But you look at like, say $1.6 trillion into the disastrous F-35 aircraft, $2.6 trillion into a war in Afghanistan that we're winding down or out of now. I don't know. Anyway, but like you get the ROI? It's like, okay, so now where's the cash flow? Where's the money coming from? It's like UAPs are weird. They're wild. Everyone's seen X-Files. So like we could use some more money. Help us figure this out.
So what you're saying in essence is because some of the other projects, shall we call them, or conflicts are not generating revenue for the Pentagon?
I'm just throwing it out there. I'm asking you. You tell me if that's a plausible idea.
110%.
Yeah, right? So, I don't know, man.
Finally.
Okay. That is the 9 pages in this report. And like I said, just go out and read it. If you find this stuff even remotely interesting, you'll find this interesting, and you can read through it on your lunch break. I promise you that. But as disappointing as it is not to get a 5,000-page report from the Pentagon or whoever else telling us what's flying around and where they're from and what their motives are and how many downcraft we have and all that sort of stuff, it is actually still really interesting. First and foremost, because it really does usher in a new era of openness. It's like they're talking about this.
Yeah, admitting it, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know in the last couple of years it's been more and more in this direction. But if you go back to the 90s, the 80s, even the 50s and the 40s, it's like this wasn't like they wouldn't even admit that there was stuff flying around. It was like it's marsh gas, it's Jupiter, it's whatever.
Exactly.
It's not even real. Now they're like, yeah, it's real, but we need more money to figure it out. Anyway, I don't want to harp on that too much. Okay, so new era of openness. Exciting. Cool. Good. It also shows that, one, UAP are real. It's real physical objects that are actually flying around up there. 2, they're physical objects. 3, they're not foreign or United States research and development, which is always the go-to. It's like, well, maybe they don't know what it is, but maybe it's Skunk Works, maybe it's Russia, maybe it's China, and they're like, yeah, no, it's really, really not.
Sure.
And that's kind of exciting, even if it's just 9 pages. So the other thing is like, there's a lot of like, we don't really know and we're not saying, and, maybe they do know, maybe they don't. And if they don't know, good intelligence is actually being able to admit that you don't know.
That's true. Yep.
So I'm not going to like knee jerk just have this reaction like, oh, what do you mean you don't know? It's like, well, no, that's could actually be a good thing. Mm-hmm. Another kind of interesting thing that's come from this is that congressional leaders in the Intelligence and Armed Services committees in Congress are like on the record saying that UAP encounters are getting more frequent.
No, that's weird.
It is weird because they have been getting some classified briefings on this stuff even before this came out.
Sure. And there's no sense that this is just, hey, it's easier and also not discouraged reporting, right? So,
right.
I mean, is it a sense that now it's just a numbers game where people actually feel like they're comfortable talking about this stuff?
That's the question. That is one of the questions. Absolutely. It's like, okay, well, are we seeing, tenfold more because there's a reporting mechanism and the stigma's gone, or are we seeing tenfold more because we're in the middle of like a new flap or like some ecological catastrophe or technological breakthrough or something? Like, what is it? What's this all about? I don't know. No one knows, really, as far as I can tell.
But the numbers clearly have gone up is what I'm hearing. So.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the Chinese state media recently implemented a UAP-type group. House Intelligence Committee, as I said, they've received classified briefings. There's a rumor floating around, and, you can't verify these things, but it was like some Hill reporter posted a rumor, and I'm just going to go with it because they're a respected journalist, saying that the classified report that members of the Armed Services Committee and the Intelligence Committee got was like 70 to 80 pages long as opposed to the 9 we got.
Okay.
So it's like, that's interesting.
Huh.
That, like, what did they see? I don't know. And, we're not going to obviously figure that out. And I'm sure if they got 70 to 80, maybe, Biden got 200 pages and maybe someone else. I don't know. Like, who knows what's out there? But everyone agrees that we need to do a better job of understanding the data. And in order to do that, we need to get better data. And we need to get more data, and we need to analyze it better. Mm-hmm. And all those things, as I said earlier, are going to cost money. So who knows? But, one of the other things, talking about the openness, this new era of openness that this has really kind of ushered us into, is that, like, presidents and ex-presidents are now on the record talking about UFOs or UAPs or whatever they are now. Biden was not too long ago asked about this. He basically dodged the question, and he said, oh, you should probably ask President Obama again or something like that. President Trump, while he was in office, he told George Stephanopoulos, he said, quote, I'll take a good look at it, and if there's aliens, quote, you'll be the first to know. So I don't know. I mean, that's not too much. But Obama, did you hear or see or read the interview he gave on James Corden's Late Late Show?
Oh, I saw clips from it a while ago. Yeah.
It's like, what? So here, let me read this to you. He says, it's a quote, when it comes to aliens, there's some things I just can't tell you on air, which I think was a laugh line.
It's kind of baiting him a little bit. Yeah,
right. But okay, nevertheless, he goes on and he says, there's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. We can't explain how they move, their trajectory. They did not have an easily explainable pattern. Which is, not a whole lot of different from the 9-page report that we got. But it's like a president of the United States talking about UFOs on the record? Like, where are we? Like, that's wild.
15 years ago, unheard of.
Unheard of, man. Even like 5 years ago.
Even to think about that is like crazy.
It really is. So it kind of leads to the question, like, how did we get here? How did we end up with this report, right? Mm-hmm. So the 2001 Intelligence Authorization Act was signed in December of 2020. It made the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of Defense, and other relevant heads of departments produce an intelligence assessment of the threat posed by UAP, and they wanted an update on the progress of the UAPTF, the UAP task force.
Sure.
So that's where it came from. The requirements were buried in the $2.3 trillion coronavirus relief bill. Senator Marco Rubio from Florida was one of the vocal advocates for this. He's like, hey, I'm not saying it's little green men, but like if stuff is buzzing around our aircraft and like doing wild stuff, we need to know what's going on.
Right.
And, it's like, okay, that's what you say to them. The cameras are on, but I got to know. Like he's what, like roughly the same age as us. He grew up watching X-Files like everyone else. You know he wants to know what's going on.
100%.
So it's like, hey, hats off to you, Senator. But even like from that, like how did we get to that? And I would say, Zach, I would venture that it all goes back to December 16th, 2017, on the front page of the New York Times, above the fold, an article by Leslie Kean. It was like UFOs, black money, and aircraft or something like that. That article in the New York Times, we've talked about, I think we have a whole episode devoted to it.
Yeah, we do.
So go back and check that out and read that article, for crying out loud. Use one of your 5 free New York Times articles for the month on that.
Totally
thing.
worth it, by the way.
It really is. And I would say that even perhaps more than this 9-page report, like that was the sea change of the UFO. It was what the UFO community was waiting for.
I think you're right. I really do.
Before then, it was a taboo topic. Like you didn't talk about it. It really just opened the door. It's like, oh, okay. The U.S. government is actively trying to figure out what's going on. They admit that there's something. They're doing this. There's money being poured into it. Members of Congress are working on this. And it just kind of blew the doors off the whole thing. And I would say very selfishly, that article was more or less the impetus for this show.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I mean, honestly, it's like we could have done a lot of topics before then, but without that just foundational reporting, it's like you talk about UFOs, it's like, are they real? Are they not? I don't know. I think they are. But it's like, no, they're real. The question is like, what are they?
Exactly.
So Leslie Kean, the lead author of that article, and there's a few other people with bylines, she believes UFOs are real, like most other people now at this point. To her, what makes her a fascinating journalist, investigative reporter, is that the what they're doing, the why they're doing it, the how they're doing it, to her, that is all speculation. 100% speculation until we have definitive proof, until there's scientific evidence or something. That's all just kind of there. And like while she's trying to figure that out, it's like don't talk about that. Let's get there. Let's not speculate. Let's focus on the facts. Let's focus on what we know. Let's talk to the people who might know and pick their brains. But that's all over there. She got her start in the UFO research community, if you will, by working with Dr. Stephen Greer.
Oh, okay.
You know him?
Yeah. Undisclosed? Unacknowledged?
Yeah, unacknowledged, I think. Yeah. He's a polarizing figure.
Sure. I actually like some of his stuff.
Sure, yeah. Look, I'm sure, I know for a fact that we have listeners of the show that 100% believe everything he says. They're like, this guy's got to figure it out. He's telling the truth. He's on board. Get on board with him. He's leading us to the promised land. There, I know for a fact there are people that listen to this show that think he's just a used car salesman and a huckster and just trying to make a buck by saying anything he can. And I don't know exactly. I probably come down somewhere in the middle. I think that he probably knows some things, but maybe not everything. Yeah, I don't know. But I have a healthy amount of skepticism for anyone who says that they have the absolute unadulterated truth on any subject.
Yeah, no, exactly. Especially this.
Especially this. It's like, okay, Stephen, like, how, why, how do you, anyway.
Yeah.
So she was working with him back before he kind of became the person he is now, I guess. And then he started making these fantastical claims, and she's like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna go in this other direction. But let's even take another step back, if you will, Zach. So the UFO phenomenon, like the actual, like, why are we even talking about this stuff?
Yeah.
Besides there's weird stuff in the skies, but it's like this cultural phenomenon, and has been since June 24th, 1947 is really, if you want to put a pinpoint on the timeline, that would be it. So there was a pilot by the name of Kenneth Arnold, a Minnesota native.
Woo, shout out.
Who was up near Mount Rainier in Washington State, and he saw a group of objects skipping through the sky like saucers. That's what he said. And he's like, like when you skip a saucer on a pond, it just kind of like moves like that. To which I say, who's skipping saucers on a pond, Kenneth Arnold? I don't know what you do in your neck of the woods in Minnesota, but anyway.
We don't do that here.
This was picked up worldwide. The AP ran with it. Everyone ran with it. And the term flying saucers was therefore forever immortalized. But since then, since Kenneth Arnold's sighting and those articles came out, there's been a lot of research. There's been a lot of articles, a lot of books written on the UFO, UAP, flying saucer phenomenon. And I will venture a guess to say that a lot of it, most of it, probably like 90% of it is really bad. Like, some of it's bad and fun, some of it's bad and good, some of it's just like really, really bad.
Yeah, cringeworthy.
Yeah. But hey, the public love this stuff, comic books, movies, you name it, books, all sorts of stuff. And the government took notice, they took note, and they saw stuff, and they had to respond to these things that people were seeing. And there were two reports that the government issued before the one we're talking about today. The first one was the Condon Report. It came out in 1968. It was a government-sponsored report, and what it basically said was that UFOs are fake and a metaphor for the Cold War anxieties that we're all feeling.
Yeah, okay. I think that one came up during the Battle of LA episode.
It probably did.
Yeah, I think that spawned to some of that. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, basically, well, especially with hindsight, with what we have now, we know that is just patently false. But it was widely seen at the time as just like the government's like, yep, nothing to see here. It's all fake. It's all made up. But, skeptics were able to point at it and be like, see, look, it's all fake and made up. No one's seeing anything. It's just Jupiter and swamp gas and you name it. Right. The other report that came out was Project Blue Book, which we've talked about a lot. And if you're at all interested in this topic, you've probably come across a little bit. Project Blue Book started in 1952. It ended in December of 1969. And it was a group of scientists and government officials that were tasked with trying to figure out what all these things were in the sky. And they did take a more scientific approach to it. Now, what they ended up releasing to the public was just completely debunking everything. Everything that they released, they're like, yep, and that's fake, and that's fake, and that's swamp gas, and that's Jupiter.
Right.
There were 12,618 different incidences that Project Blue Book looked into over that span of time, 17-year span of time. Of those 12,618, 701 of them remained truly unexplained.
That's pretty good, actually.
Yeah, I didn't run the math, but it's a healthy percentage. And they never put those on a pedestal and talked about them or released those in a report. But one of the scientists who was a part of Project Blue Book, his name is J. Allen Hynek. Have you ever come across that name?
No.
He's one of the giants in the field, one of the truly respected journalists that really tried to get to the bottom of this stuff. So you have people like Jacques Vallée, French, billionaire, I think. And anyway, he writes a lot of great stuff. J. Allen Hynek, Dolan's another one. But anyway, he was a part of Project Blue Book. He realized and said afterwards that the whole point was basically to try and debunk these things.
Sure.
And there were still a few they couldn't. And then he made a name for himself, like talking about Project Blue Book and talking about these weird things and then doing his own research after the fact. So if you ever see a book by him or a documentary or something, check it out. He is fantastic. But he did a lot of really good research on his own, and it's all based in fact, or at least as much as he can. And Leslie Kean, remember Leslie Kean?
Of course.
She really tries to base her career on that J. Allen Hynek philosophy. It's like, let's talk about what we know and leave the speculation for other people. And that is why I at least find her absolutely fascinating.
That's also why we have a podcast.
Go on.
Well, leave the speculation to us. I mean, that's basically exactly what it is, right?
That's true.
We're happy to read the report and settle our beliefs in, science.
Exactly.
And the speculation is going to run rampant here.
That's our bread and butter right here. But she's a fascinating cat. I want to talk a little bit about who she is because it's interesting. Her family actually founded the Massachusetts Bay Colony. She had delegates at the Continental Congress. Her grandfather served 10 terms in Congress. Her uncle was a governor of New Jersey and the chair of the 9/11 Commission.
So what I'm hearing you say is she's an insider.
Yeah.
Actually?
Well, yes.
I mean, I was kind of joking, but kind of serious.
Well, I think that when she started to become interested by this stuff and then pivot to using her journalism excellence, she was able to get a little bit more access, perhaps, than other people. Or if not get access, she knew who to talk to and who to ask the questions to.
Well, could she also have something to gain? I mean, is this a misinformation campaign?
No, I don't think so.
Military industrial complex, anyone? Hello?
Sure. I really don't think so. But she personally became interested in this stuff when a friend of hers sent her a 90-page report written by dozens of French generals.
Oh, sure.
I think we've referenced this on the show before, basically being like, what the heck is flying around up there? We see it, you see it, I've seen it. Like, we need to look into this.
Yes.
And because they were retired, they were able to say a lot more. And because they were generals, people took it seriously. And
that was in like 2003 or something. It was a while ago.
Yeah, it wasn't like back in the 70s or something. Yeah.
Right. Like France and I think Belgium were both proactively looking into this stuff.
Yes, exactly.
And the U.S. came along 15 years later and just kind of said, oh, yeah, we'll do it too.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, we're the only ones doing it. We're the only ones worth listening to. You're right.
That's what anyways, continue. Yeah.
Anyway, but she kept an open mind and she kept trying to do this research, trying to like dig into it herself. I mean, without like, actively pitching an article or like the editor of XYZ magazine or newspaper being like, look into this. She's like just trying to figure this out on her own. And she was looking in, so I had never come across this. 1965 Pennsylvania Ufo Crash. Have you ever heard of this one?
No, this one. No.
I hadn't either. Now, she did a FOIA request, which is a Freedom of Information Act request. And she's like, hey, maybe it's a satellite. Maybe it was a spy plane. Maybe it was a meteor. I don't know, but something crashed. And the military blocked everything off for a period of time. And I want to know, what was going on? Send me the documents. And they're like, no, we're not going to. So she took them to court. And they're like, yeah, we're not going to. So then she, appealed. And they're like, okay, well, we have to, but we lost everything. And the stuff we didn't lose, it was accidentally destroyed. So there's nothing we can give you. And she's like, what the heck?
Yeah, classic.
Come on.
Right.
What are you trying to hide?
That's brutal.
And the other one that really just kind of piqued her interest was the 2006 UFO case at O'Hare Airport in Chicago. Do you remember this?
Remind me.
Well, so apparently a UFO or a UAP, a disc-shaped object came straight down from the sky and hovered over a tarmac, and pilots on the ground waiting to take off were like, Tower, do you see this? What is that? I'm not going crazy, am I? And there's all this back and forth, and I don't think there's any video evidence of it. I mean, if there is, I haven't seen it. If you have it, send it to me because I'd love to see it. But like all of a sudden, as quickly as it showed up, it just like shot into the air at some astronomical speed and then like poked a hole in the clouds. So like, and there's pictures of that. There's just like it's like a cloudy day and then like blue sky in like one small little part.
That's wild.
It is wild. And like she does a FOIA request and they're like, no, it's all lost in a flood or a fire or something. Sorry, nothing we can show you.
That's bad.
Nothing there.
That's really bad.
So she's like, okay, well, there's clearly something here and I'm going to keep trying to figure this out. But yeah, like you mentioned, France did this. The UK has their own report. Denmark, Brazil, Russia, Sweden have some form of a declassified report on the UAP phenomenon. U.S. is a little late to the game, but again, clearly the most important player in the game. But she starts asking the right people, the right questions, probably because of her contacts and because she's a respected journalist, yada, yada, yada. And then June 2011, John Podesta of Pizzagate. No, I mean, John Podesta is a respected or was a well-respected and well-connected lobbyist in D.C., well-connected guy. He invited Leslie Kean to a talk at a think tank with John Hopkins physicists, foreign military figures, NASA members, Pentagon members, Department of Transportation, congressional staff, retired Intel staff. And the purpose of the talk was to try to figure out how to undo the 50 years of UAP pseudoscience and folklore. They're like, oh, because he's notoriously very fascinated by this stuff.
Yes.
Podesta is.
That's right. Yep.
And he's like, clearly there's something going on. We can all kind of admit that. How do we move the conversation in a way where we're not talking about little green men from Zeta Reticuli, but we're talking about like weird craft from above doing insane aerial maneuvers around our battleships and our military installations. Like we need to start doing this. So the think tank happens and time passes and she keeps digging. And then October 4th, 2017, Christopher Mellon, the Department Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, Leslie Kean, Hal Puthoff, who you'll remember from, if you're a Patreon member, you'll remember from last week's remote viewing episode, Luis Elizondo, Jim Semivan, who's a retired CIA member. They all met for a 3-hour classified briefing in the back room of some upscale, ritzy, fancy D.C. restaurant. And that was actually Lou Elizondo's last day at the Pentagon.
Oh, wow.
They all sat around and they had a talk. And Lou, if you don't know him, he worked on the ATIP, or the ATIP, I don't know how you say that, which is the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which Harry Reid funded to start looking into this stuff. They showed documents to Leslie about what the United States knew about the UAP. And 1 week after this meeting, Mellon, Puthoff, Elizondo, and Semivan all joined To the Stars Academy.
Sure.
The weird organization run by the former singer, songwriter, guitarist from Blink-182, Tom DeLonge. Yeah. If this isn't weird enough yet, these...
The problem I have with To the Stars Academy, and I'll be on the record, and I'd happily debate this with the members. The name is so stupid. It's just a stupid name.
Dumb.
It's not an academy, right? And just don't To the Star. It's just stupid. Give it a cool name. Just change the name, and I'll be totally behind it. Like, yeah, actually, what they're doing is really progressive. It's super important. Yeah, right. UAP Inc. I don't know, something.
I think the whole purpose, it was like a multifaceted approach to like disclosure with a capital D. It's like we need to start things in the media. We need to do movies and books and television programs. And then we need to like patent this technology that's going to be coming in. So it's like all these different things. But like the point is like a week after the meeting, like these pretty big wigs like all joined us like, dude, Tom DeLonge, what are you hiding? What's going on there? And anyway, 2 months after the meeting, the New York Times article was published. The rest is history. But the article basically said that the U.S. knows, tracks and cares about what is happening with the UAP, and of course Harry Reid, former Senator Harry Reid's $22 million into the ATIP program. And again, like, it just changed the conversation so much. It is hard to overstate how much that single article really changed everything around this whole topic.
Makes sense. Well, okay, so I mean, coming back through this now, I'm reminded of the fact that, the significance of this paper, or whatever we want to call it, piece of information, isn't so much the literal 9 pages. It's really what it represents,
right?
Which I guess is a pretty significant shift, at least in terms of how we look at and talk and study the UAP phenomenon.
True. It's like, would I rather it had been 90 pages or 900 pages? Of course. Would I rather it had not been bullet points and just 141 were this? Maybe. 80 said this, kind of, but we can't say anything more. Of course. But it really does represent a whole thing. And I guess I didn't say that, one of the things in the original piece of legislation that prompted this report was that there needs to be regular and periodic updates made.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So maybe we'll see more. Maybe they'll just go to some classified briefing in Congress, and you and I will never get to see them.
Yeah, that's true too.
But it really, it's. I guess I'm trying to have my cake and eat it too. I'm comfortable being disappointed, but I'm also comfortable saying this is kind of a big deal.
It'd be a lot funnier if you had read a 900-page report and you summarized it in 9 pages, and it was exactly the same thing.
Same thing. Hey, we came to the same conclusions.
I spent all this time reading 900 pages.
Who would have thought, man?
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
So maybe this is the best case scenario, huh? At least for the show.
Yeah, right? Well, I have read 900 pages for some episodes, so we don't have to go down that path. But there are some other cool things happening. Non-governmental things happening now.
Okay.
Avi Loeb. We've talked about him a little bit.
That guy. I really like him. I totally respect what he's doing. He was everywhere for 2 months in the spring and nowhere to be found anymore.
Yeah.
Not some weird conspiracy theory, but it was Oumuamua everywhere.
Mr. Oumuamua. Yeah,
gone.
Well, if you don't know who this guy is, I don't think he is still, but he was at least the former Harvard head of the astronomy department. Mm-hmm. So he was the one that very famously said that Oumuamua, that interstellar object that passed through for a brief blip, was in fact an extraterrestrial craft. Mm-hmm. He's like, yes, it was. Period.
Yeah, prove me wrong.
prove me wrong. Oh, you can't? Okay, well, tough. I work at Harvard, so good luck with that, sucker.
Some simple math, allow me.
Oh, look over there. He really is a fascinating guy, and his book is interesting, too. It's called Extraterrestrial. If you really like the Oumuamua stuff, check it out. It's a pretty quick and easy read in and of itself. But he's looking into this stuff, too. So he, along with Harvard people, it's a Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics joint venture. It is called the Galileo Project, and it will be the search for extraterrestrial life by studying UAP.
I see. Okay.
So he's kind of refocusing that telescope in the astronomy department to be a little bit closer now. Not looking at the planets, he's looking at the weird crafts zipping around. But he's got all sorts of people on this. He's got people from Harvard, from Princeton, from Cambridge, from Caltech, from Yale, and they are trying to do 3 things, basically. 1, get a high-resolution picture of one of these. All they need is one.
Here, I got one right here. Hold on.
Right. What? Yeah. But they want this, they want megapixel cameras on, jets and stuff like that.
Well, it's a thing we've been missing, which is an actual clear photo of one of these things. Everything we've seen today has been blurry, gray. It's it doesn't make any sense.
Which is what the skeptics point out. They're like, oh, come on. Everyone's got cell phones now. No one's gotten a picture of this. It's it's usually at night. They're moving really fast.
Yeah.
And all sorts of other reasons. The second thing they want to do with these pictures or just one, I guess. They want to use AI and deep learning to start to identify the objects and the causes. So even if they don't have that, they want to use this technology to figure out more readily, easily figure out what is and what is not truly unidentified. And, of course, look for more Oumuamua objects out there. Because he is Mr. Oumuamua, but...
He will be forever Mr. Oumuamua.
Kind of is.
Yeah.
Until he, takes a 20 megapixel photo of a, UAP in his backyard. And then it's like, okay, well, good for you, buddy. Anyway, any thoughts, any final things? 9 pages, thumbs up, thumbs down, disappointed? Where's your head at?
Thumbs up, I would say. So, yes, of course, I would love to hear somebody in even a 9-page report explain exactly what's going on. Mm-hmm. I am in no way surprised to hear that we didn't get that in the report. That being said, there's still a lot of interesting stuff in there. And like I said earlier, I think it's not about what it is so much as what it represents. And I think that the shift in terms of our society and how we're talking about this stuff and even studying it now, which is huge. And maybe, perhaps, hopefully, by talking about this stuff, studying it out in the open, we'll actually make some progress.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm hopeful for, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well said.
Cool.
You summarized it all in 9 seconds.
Who knows? You host a podcast, you figured this out after a while. Where's your head at? Real quick.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's, as I said before, it's disappointing it wasn't more. It's disappointing it didn't say more in more detail. I would have loved to see some pictures or videos or anything, but it really does just kind of, it's a sea change. It really is a new era in the UFO, the UAP community, all that research stuff. It's, who knows? Year from now, we're going to be talking about, whether they're from Zeta Reticuli or, some moon in Jupiter. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you liked what you heard, we got a lot more episodes, so hit subscribe and rate and review. Check it out. We also got a Patreon feed. You get one of these episodes every single week if that is what you'd like. So head on over to www.patreon.com/ what is it, Crackpot Podcast?
You know it.
Crackpot Podcast. And sign up over there. And tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your local intelligence official about our podcast. And we will see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.